Thanks for joining us today on Mormon Land, where we explore news in and about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm managing editor Dave Noyce. I oversee the Salt Lake Tribune's faith coverage. I'm joined once again by senior religion reporter Peggy Fletcher-Stack. Hello, Peggy.
Hi, Dave.
We remind our listeners about another way to support Mormon Land. Just go to patreon.com, where with a donation as small as $3 a month, you can access transcripts to our podcast, our complete newsletter, and all of our exclusive religion coverage. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Mormonland. Now for today's show. Last week, officials with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced a combined donation of $44 million to a number of nonprofit organizations dealing with global hunger. Quote, "No humanitarian effort is more foundational to Christ's church than feeding the hungry," Relief Society President Camille Johnson, head of the faith's global women's organization, said. "We are grateful to have the means to collaborate with wonderful organizations and provide relief to children and young mothers in dire need," end quote. But what about starving Latter-day Saint children, specifically in developing countries? After seeing hungry kids at church during his Latter-day Saint mission to Ecuador, Las Vegas physician Brad Walker returned decades later and launched the Liahona Children's Foundation to provide a caloric and vitamin supplement to those suffering from malnutrition. It began small, but now his nonprofit, which changed its name 2 years ago to the Bountiful Children's Foundation, actively serves nearly 20,000 children and many of their mothers in 16 countries, according to its website, and is working with the church's division over humanitarian services for members. But the needs remain great. Walker joins us today via Zoom to explain those needs and how this new collaboration is working and sometimes not working. Dr. Walker, welcome.
Thank you.
So glad to have you with us. So tell us what prompted you to start the Liahona Children's Foundation.
In the year 1999, I went to Ecuador and met up with the pediatric stake president who told me about the malnutrition problem where I served my mission. I'd seen plenty of it during the mission, but I'd left my mission almost 20 years earlier. So he asked me to try to do something about it. So the first thing I tried to do was contact people at church headquarters and see if we could make some progress that way. I did get a high-level response, and some people tried to help me, but it ultimately told me that if anything was going to happen, we had to make it happen on our own. So then I said, I left one thing out. I published a series of studies about the problem, one of which was childhood malnutrition in Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought that won some kind of Issues and Essays award in 2002 and 2003, I think it was. So once I heard that we had to be the ones that made it happen, then we tried to make it happen. So we set up an initial foundation to deal with malnutrition. It was just in Ecuador, though, and a couple of stakes in Ecuador. That led to a battle with the area welfare manager who shut the project down. So then that was in 2007. So we said, oh, gee, that was ugly. What do we do now? And then we came up with the thought that we should work through the stake presidents. So we started calling the stake presidents as funding allowed and asked them to work with us. And I was the one that did those calls initially, maybe for the first 150 or so stakes or districts. And the stake presidents, I would say 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, were happy to work with us. So then we started opening up projects under the guise of the stake presidents or the district presidents who picked the person who was going to manage the program. And that kind of eliminated the problem, I think, the political or maybe just kind of turf wars with the area welfare managers. They weren't able to intervene against the stake presidents anymore. So that problem never recurred again. And we started out kind of small, I think 7 stakes. And then we had an article published. I know I'm answering long. You told me not to answer, so I got an article. There's an outfit called By Common Consent. So we were kind of low on our funding, maybe $30,000. And they published an article and our funding went up to $250,000 within 12 months. From there, it just kept going up and we hit about $1 million by 2015. So then we could open up a couple of hundred steaks. We're a very low-cost operation. Even Salt Lake Welfare said, you guys have the lowest cost humanitarian foundation I think we've ever seen. It's kind of ridiculous. So we haven't had any employees or we don't spend a lot of money on administration or fundraising, but we managed to get up to $1 million. And with that, we opened up services in a couple of hundred states.
Where are you serving right now? Where are the most of the countries that you're in?
We're spread out. We've got quite a bit in the Philippines, which has a very large LDS population. That has the largest population of malnourished children.
Mm-hmm.
The second largest population was Venezuela here for the last few years, but that's improved some here more recently with the change in the political and hunger situation in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
We have a large population in West Africa, also in Zimbabwe and Madagascar, and all throughout Latin America. We have quite a few malnourished children. The biggest populations we haven't gotten to yet, oddly, are Mexico. We haven't gone into Mexico. That's got about 10,000 or more malnourished LDS children. Brazil's got about 5,000. We haven't gone to those two countries. Argentina's picked up a population recently. I mean, they didn't for many years have any malnourished kids. They've made a comeback there with the economic instability. So there's a few thousand now in Argentina where we haven't gotten to, but we're in most countries except in Africa where there's a significant populations of LDS children that are malnourished. But we aren't covering the entire population in these countries. So right. I'm going to say there's 150,000 malnourished LDS kids out there, and we've only gotten to maybe 9,000 of them. So the church itself has started in a collaboration with our foundation, providing services to the malnourished kids in Guatemala and Honduras. And that is, about 3,000 LDS kids. So they're paying for about 3,000 of the kids, and we're covering the other 12,000 that we're helping.
Yeah. Now, Brad, malnutrition, of course, knows no religious boundaries, of course. It affects people. But what do you see among the Latter-day Saint kids? What have you seen and witnessed about where they grapple with these that are the malnourished or frankly hungry and starving children in the Latter-day Saint population?
Well, we're better in Africa, and that's because we've emphasized wealthier converts in Africa. So we have less malnutrition in Africa than the general population. But that's still the worst place for us. I mean, it's coming up, it's almost going to hit 50% of the malnourished kids. I would expect 50% of the kids that are malnourished that are church members to be in Africa in 20 years. The Philippines, Asia is worse than the average population. What does that mean? Than the rest of the communities in which they live. And that's because they're baptizing people who have lower incomes on average than the average population over in Asia. Latin America is about the same. The South Pacific, there's actually a significant population in the South Pacific that's malnourished. It's about the same as the general population as well. So it just depends on who was converted, what their socioeconomic status was.
Well, what are the long-term consequences of malnutrition for kids?
Well, death in about 7%.
That's a big...
and maybe just decreased cognition. About on an IQ scale, they usually will drop 20% to 30% on an IQ scale. The other long-term complications is they're short and they're weaker as adults. They have a lot of trouble performing manual labor, which most of them try to end up doing kind of manual labor. Excuse me.
So what was your plan? What's your plan to help with malnutrition?
We're trying to copy the program used by all the big players in malnutrition work. So globally, there's about 7 to 8 billion spent on malnutrition for about 140 million kids. So we try to copy that program, although we've emphasized stunting as well. Stunting is a lower level of malnutrition. It's kind of a chronic malnutrition where the child is short and they only die about 3% of the time. So we've emphasized that more because that's what most children have. as well as MAM, the acute malnutritions, which are much more deadly. MAM kills about 10%, and SAM kills about 40% if untreated. So we emphasize stunting more than the general programs do, which just go after the kids who are about to die. They don't try to help the ones who are chronically in trouble as well. So we're trying to help all those populations at the same time in the states we work in. So we're trying to help all the kids, but we have two problems. In a lot of the states, especially in the Philippines, we just don't have enough money, even within the state, to help all the kids. So if you talk to the coordinators, I think that's the one complaint I've heard the most is they just can't decide who to leave off. And they've helped the kids. So right now in a lot of the states, there's kids that are left off. So that's the first thing we've done to avoid expenses. The second thing we'll do is we don't give them as many calories as they need and micronutrients. So we just don't have enough money. I mean, we expanded so quick and so far. We wanted to get a lot of stakes open to see if we could get the church to come on board. And so we aren't helping as much as we would like. I mean, we tried to follow the general guidelines of the big players, but we don't have enough money to completely implement it. But then again, neither do they. They don't have enough money either.
So when you say you're trying to help, are just really practically and specifically, are these supplements, vitamin supplements? I mean, are they pills? Are they some kind of food item? Are they granola bars? I mean, what?
They're a fortified food product. So if I go over the food products you can use, we'll start out with meat or animal protein. It's too expensive. I mean, animal protein costs 4 times what we're paying. So we can't afford animal protein. So you throw out that. The next higher cost thing you could use is eggs. Well, eggs are animal protein, I guess, but they're not as expensive as meat, fish, and chicken. It's that kind of pork. But they're still more expensive than powdered cow's milk. So probably the thing we use the most is, well, it's not the thing we use the most, but in some countries where there's not a good supplement available, we do use powdered cow's milk, but it costs $12 a month for a full supply for a child for a year, or for a month. Since we only have $6 to spend, then we give them half the calories they need with powdered cow's milk. So that's a very good nutritional supplement after age 1 and above. We'll use powdered cow's milk. Then you go to the world's best supplement, which is soy-based products. That would be Inca Purina in Guatemala. We use throughout South America, mostly soy-based products. We can do that for about $5 per kid month. So if we can find a soy-based product, and we have people manufacture it for us in many areas, we'll use a soy-based product. So this is a product where they'll throw in some vitamins or micronutrients. It's the same thing, plus the soy, usually with some corn, a little bit of oil, and a little bit of powdered cow's milk. It's called a corn soy blend. That's what we use the most. The second thing we use the most is powdered milk. And in areas where, in the Philippines specifically, we use from age 2 up, we use peanut butter, which is a very good supplement. It doesn't cost a lot in the Philippines, but you can't start taking it until age 2. So, the real critical period is from 6 months to, we also supplement mothers when they're pregnant. So we start with mothers while they're pregnant. Once they find out they're pregnant, if they're the mothers, you don't treat them based on their height and weight. You just treat them if you think they're poor. So then you usually with the mothers, we'll give them corn soy blend for sure, or peanut butter. But from there, with the kids, we're usually using one of those 3 products. So it kind of gives people an idea. They make it, a lot of times they'll stick it in a package. Adults really don't like to eat soy that much. It's not real tasty. If you've ever eaten soy, you'll know that. You can come try it. I'll give you some. We got some in the United States we give out at meetings. You can taste what soy-based products taste like. They aren't real tasty.
It's not real popular at the potluck, is what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, they would be popular on the potluck. Yes.
So are these items distributed at church, or how do the people get them?
That's dependent on the area presidency. It's not necessarily been stable across the years. I mean, sometimes they tell us to use the churches. Why do they tell us to use? Well, we use the churches because it's hard for the families to get hold of the supplements. I mean, some of these stakes are way spread out. I mean, you're talking about an area that would be the entire, much bigger than the Salt Lake Valley. The poor coordinator's trying to get supplements to 200 kids in a large area like that. It's impossible. I mean, if it's so much easier, it's so much more effective to get them at church if you can. Then you've got maybe 80% of them covered for the month that showed up to church. You know, got to go get it to the other 20%. But some of the areas we aren't allowed to use the churches. And then it becomes kind of chaotic. I mean, you know, sometimes I know this will sound strange, but some of the areas we distribute the supplements on sidewalks in front of the church, or also these poor folks doing parks. So it can be kind of entertaining to go out and work with them. Some of the BYU students have gone out across the years and where we can't use the chapels and help distribute. You know, it's a real adventure trying to get the supplement product to the child. It's not as easy as it looks. People sit and think, you got 100 kids in one stake. All you got to do is go by their house and drop it off. Okay, well, we only can pay one person. We give that person just reimbursement of their expenses. So you've got one poor coordinator here who's a sister in the stake that the stake president selected, trying to get the supplements out to 100 houses, or maybe 80 or 90. It's quite a task. It really is something to see how they managed to get this job done. They've been pretty creative. It's if anybody out there to listen to this has time, wants to go out, run around with with some of the coordinators, it's entertaining to watch them get the supplements to the kids. These aren't rich areas at all.
So, Brad, when did the church get involved with your foundation? How did it? And is it working? I mean, you explained some of the initial overtures, but
Yeah, I would more say that across the years, I told you we had one project going that got shut down by an area welfare manager. Then when we restarted up with this using the stake presidents, it kind of slowly built up and had really good support. I mean, almost universal support from the stake presidents. Most of the area presidents have been very supportive, but they don't have any money to help with the malnutrition work. So if you're in poor stakes and around the globe, the fast offering donations are about $1 per person year. Now that includes all the adults, not just the kids. And the stake presidents have got to deal with families, with unemployment, illness, death, funerals, stuff like that. So there wasn't really, they didn't have any money and still don't to manage a project that costs $6 per kid month when they've only got $1 per kid year, and they don't even have that much to help out the kids. So they supported us logistically by letting us use the chapels. They supported us by calling the coordinator. They supported us by, approving and allowing it. But so we're talking about the local and area leadership. I think, that's been our support. So about 2018, we had a first meeting. It was 2018. We had a first meeting with higher level church authorities. And at that point, they wanted to support the project, but there were still some internal factions that were opposed to the idea. And they just never got around to it until I think the first announcement came out about 18 months ago now, maybe a little later than that, 15 months ago. And the church news that the malnutrition project by the church was beginning. So they've gotten involved, but they haven't made much progress. That's in terms of assisting us or in getting it done at all. And that's more just kind of a general bureaucratic inertia. I mean, the areas aren't set up to run a malnutrition project. They get assigned to do it. They don't have anybody to do it. They don't have a budget to hire people to do it. They don't know how to do it, et cetera. They don't want to get help. So it's more of just a kind of a general bureaucratic inertia. So I think there's the desire to do it. There's the budget to do it. There's the approval to do it. It's just, how is it going to happen? Who's going to do it? They have a very aggressive plan to make it happen. So we're just trying to support them wherever we can. And sometimes when you're starting up a new project, the planning phase can get going and it never ends. So I'm trying to think about I work for a lot of county bureaucracy, so I kind of understand it from that perspective. So there's been a lot of planning, pilots, this, that, and the other, but nothing's ever happened for the kids. They haven't gotten the calories and micronutrients across it's been about 5 years now, maybe a little bit more than 5 years. Not a lot, but it has started, at least in Central America. So it doesn't have to be our foundation that does it. We're not paid people. We're just volunteers. And we're happy to let anybody run it. The church doesn't want to run it directly because of the legal exposure that would occur by running a malnutrition project. I mean, I got to agree with church legal there. They say, well, what happens if somebody makes a mistake? We shouldn't be running. We're not a religion. We're not a malnutrition project. We don't have health workers. We're not experienced in that area. So they want to do something where somebody else is contracted to run the projects, at least right now. So I'm trying to compare it to some other else. Like, let's say the Adventists have the ADRA, right? The Adventist Development and Relief Agency. The Catholics have Caritas. We have LDS charities, but they aren't doing direct work. I mean, they aren't doing field work at all. They never have. So we don't have anybody to go to say, manage this project, run this project. We don't have a humanitarian arm that does field work.
Does your foundation, Brad, work with the government or civil authorities at all? And maybe you don't, but I'm just wondering.
You're into a complicated question there. Okay, in some of the countries that go to the government, they're going to try to extort your workers. I mean, literally, you would say they wouldn't do that. Yes, they would and have. It's not just an idea. So you have to be careful involving the government in anything. They're after your money. They are not trying to help you in many of these countries. That's not universal, but in general, I think there's some nervousness about involving the government for that reason, because we're a small outfit. And what are they really going to do? I mean, we had an example would be, we made some contacts in one government. I won't name the country. And our coordinator picked up the money to go buy the supplements, and she got robbed on the way there. It's like, brother, the government sent people to steal the money. So I told her, okay, don't ever again carry cash. Only pick up the supplement. I mean, if I figure out a different way to pay for it, that was Inca Purina, specifically somewhere in Central America. So we do have to be careful working with the governments, but not. The church would like a more formal relationship with the governments. That's something that they would prefer. And we're currently, I don't know how else to say here, but we've hired somebody whose job it is to get area level teams of people together and pay them that can manage the projects that are mostly church members. And we want to have contacts with the government regularly, but the extortion issue, I think, would be less if the church were involved than just our little foundation being involved. So that's kind of a tough question, but it was a good question. I think. I don't know if I answered it, though.
So let's go back to your statement that the church doesn't really do field work, but it somehow did create a division of the humanitarian department that's mostly for members. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a new department that was brought in maybe 2.5 years ago, which was humanitarian work for members. This specifically is projects that fast offering isn't good enough to cover. So I said here at the start, fast offering program cannot take care of the malnourished children. It's not well enough funded. And I don't expect that to change. So they started a new division or department called Humanitarian for Members. The person who runs it's very dedicated. I'm trying to think through it here, but they don't have any field. They aren't doing any field work at all. They want to contract out field work. Churches always work with contractors. Even, this donation we just talked about, the $44 million, that's to the very biggest players in malnutrition around the globe. They left out Oxfam. They left out UNICEF. But I think they've donated to those two groups.
They have given to UNICEF before, though, many times. So yes.
And Oxfam too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that how we should be? Should we make a division like Caritas, like ADRA, the Adventist Development? In my opinion, yes. We should make a division that can run this kind of stuff for ourselves then we've contracted it out to somebody that knows what they're doing. But right now, there is no such thing as that division. So I think there's hesitancy to work with us. We're a small group. We got a lot of BYU professors on there. We've got we got ex-mission presidents and all kinds of experienced people. We've got a much better technical team than anything that's up in Salt Lake on our little foundation. But there's hesitancy to work with somebody that small. We don't have our own thing. So then
it seems crazy.
The project's announced, it's funded, but nobody implements it. So it's that.
It does seem that the church has a pretty good system. It's got awards and stakes and area presidencies. You would think that having a program like yours, that the church could implement it fairly easily. Right?
Easily?
Well, again, the system is in place. The system of the structure seems like it could be utilized that way.
Well, I'll give you some information here. Okay, so there's been at least by the church, either at the area level or at least one that originated up in Salt Lake. There's probably been 7 or 8 attempts to implement malnutrition programs. They were all technical failures, not even close. They were so bad that they didn't even get anywhere close to first base on them. So why? Because they, if you call them a couple who's serving a mission that were professionals, let's say I take people who ran a construction business. That was one person who tried to do it. Well, that doesn't allow you to know what to do for malnutrition, childhood malnutrition. You just don't know what you're doing. I'm sorry, but it doesn't translate. It's not like calling a mission president. You have to call people with professional backgrounds in that area. So there were a lot of attempts to do it through the area presidencies, through this person, for that person, but they were technical failures. And again, they weren't even close. So I agree with legal that the church itself should not run malnutrition programs. I think that's the right decision. I think based on experience, it's the right decision. But that doesn't mean there couldn't be a collaborative humanitarian foundation that could. That's all.
So you've said that the budget from this department to end hunger is already 15 million or something like that, but the technical details still need to be worked out. How much would you say it would take? What kind of budget would it take to meet the hunger needs of Latter-day Saint kids? Just ballpark.
In our project, if they were to copy our project, we have one non-member kid for each member kid. So it'd be about 30 million, 15 for the members, 15 for the non-members. That's what they're doing in Central America. They're doing more than one non-member. So they have started in one area, but the area presidency has to decide how to do it. All right, but okay, the area presidents are busy. They're so busy, they're traveling like 46 out of 52 weeks a year. That's ridiculous. No, even the best CEOs don't manage what they're doing. They don't even try. That's a crazy schedule that you're gone. You're probably gone from home to at least 2/3 of the time. So that's the area presidency. They're lucky to even have a meeting once a week. So you get with them with the crazy flights around these countries where you don't know if there's going to be flights and you don't know if you're going to make it back. So then the area welfare managers, they're also so busy. Gee, they've got all kinds of projects they're running. They're dealing with this, that, and the other. They may get 50 calls a week. They've got all kinds of humanitarian projects they're running. They don't have time to manage a malnutrition project for LDS kids. They just can't. They don't have time. So if you assign those people to do it, they don't have enough time. They don't have the technical background. And now you're trying to create, I'm trying to think of how many areas we could work with, probably. There's 1, 2, 3 in Africa. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in Latin America. There's 3 in Asia. There's 1 in the South Pacific. What does that add up to? About 14 or something, whatever it is. If you assign it to the areas, well, you're going to have 14 different projects. You're trying to make sure they're all technically correct. There's no centralized authority making sure they're doing it right. It's just a recipe for disaster. There needs to be like a humanitarian arm with a single person or committee or board or something assigned to the project. Who could do it? Well, I think the General Relief Society board and presidency would be great. So would the primary. But to expect the area presidencies to run a malnutrition program and the people at the area levels without being specifically assigned to it as their principal job can't work. Okay.
Yeah. Brad, I was just going to.
Anyway, go ahead.
Brad, I was just going to ask about Relief Society because, that's in their name, Relief Society. It's in the name. And it seems like General Relief Society level on right on down to the congregational level could help immensely with this project, right? And with this goal.
Yeah, the rumor is that the General Relief Society president has been assigned by the highest possible person to implement this. But she has no bureaucratic authority to hire. She doesn't have any personnel. She doesn't have any budget. The budget's through somebody else over in a humanitarian for members. I don't know. It's a complicated bureaucratic problem right now. That's the reason that 5 years after it was kind of decided to do it, there's only out of 150,000, the church is only helping 3,000 kids. It's for that reason. It's difficult to figure it out bureaucratic. They know they want to contract it. So if the Relief Society president's way for it to succeed at the church level probably is Relief Society and primary. Nobody else is going to have enough time for it.
So last question here, what are your hopes for the coming years? What can regular members do?
Well, if they donate to our foundation, they can get to the kids immediately because we can expand. But our budget's been at about 1.2 million now for 5 or 6 years. So I'm not expecting that that's going to happen. But that's one way that the average Jane or Joe can contribute. Another way, that's probably the only way at present. But like I say, the church has a very aggressive schedule. They want to, by the end of 2024, have every LDS child screened and taken care of. But the only way for that to happen is through the group already out there doing it. If they try to do more pilots, more planning phase, more kind of just superficial action, that could drag on for. It's already been going on for 5 years. It go for another 5. So they have an aggressive schedule to get the kids help, but there's nobody, understandably, to use a small foundation like ours. I'm 63 and a half. Most of our board's older than me. We're all going to be dead soon. So, yeah, they want something more permanent. But if you're going to get to the kids fast, because 6 of them starve to death every day, you have to make it happen now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. So probably the only realistic possibility is to allow our foundation to go out and screen all the kids and get them help. Then across the next, however many years they want to take planning, piloting, looking at every possible partner, all that, like they've been doing, they'll have all the time they want. In the meantime, the kids are getting help. We don't care if we get replaced, just as long as the kids get help quickly. So that's what we're after. I know that's what the leader, Luis Manuel of the Humanitarian for Members is after. The question is, will it happen? So let's just stay tuned. Well, don't stay tuned. I probably won't ever talk about it again. Anybody, but,
well, Brad Walker, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And we wish you all the best in this important work, of course. So, and thanks to Peggy Fletcher-Stack.
Always a pleasure.
And to our producer, Theodora Soter. We remind you that you can keep up on all the happenings in and about the church by subscribing to the Salt Lake Tribune's free Mormon Land newsletter. Just go to sltrib.com to sign up, and we'll talk again next time on Mormon Land.